In the early 2000s, James Bond was on the brink of cultural extinction. While Pierce Brosnan had somewhat revived the franchise in the 1990s after Eon's legal problems, his saga eventually slid into a rapid decline in quality. 1995's GoldenEye was sharp, modern, and exciting, but from there, the film seriously fell off. Tomorrow Never Dies, while not terrible, felt very formulaic and manufactured. The World Is Not Enough was bloated and uneven, trying for emotion it couldn't quite earn in my opinion. And by 2002, Die Another Day had turned Bond into a cartoon, with invisible cars, CGI surfing, and over-the-top villains. While still massively successful financially, the soul of Bond had been lost. Post-Cold War Bond was no longer Ian Fleming's creation, the cold, brutal assassin who killed without hesitation. As Timothy Dalton once said, Bond was the most ruthless hero cinema had ever seen, and if you drift far enough away from that, you become a parody of yourself. And Dalton, who's actually my personal favorite Bond, definitely deserves his own deep dive at some point, but that's a topic for another day. But my problem with Brosnan's saga wasn't just the script or directors. It was also Brosnan himself. In interviews, he has openly admitted that he basically pieced his Bond together by copying a little from Sean Connery and a little from Roger Moore. That right there says it all. Instead of digging into Fleming's darker, more complex character or making the character his own, he went with the safe, cookie-cutter option that casual audiences were bound to accept anyway. Brosnan was basically just Bond on autopilot, and to me, it became more and more painfully obvious as his films went on. And so by the time Die Another Day hit theaters, Bond had in fact become a parody of himself. If the franchise was ever going to be taken seriously and respected again, it needed a rebirth. Although Eon Productions acquired the rights to Ian Fleming's Bond novels in 1961, Fleming had previously sold the film rights to Casino Royale, first for the 1954 TV adaptation and later for the 1967 parody film. So in the early 2000s, when Eon finally got their hands on the full film rights to Fleming's original story, they were sitting on a goldmine. The opportunity to bring the first and darkest Bond novel to the big screen had come at the perfect time to cure the hangover of Brosnan's final bloated spectacle and bring the franchise back to its roots. Brosnan was the first Bond actor who effectively got fired, as the producers no longer felt he was the right man for the role. And quite frankly, I agree with that. When Ian decided to finally adapt Casino Royale, the choice of who would play Bond was massive. Barbara Broccoli herself had emphasized that. She, Michael Wilson, and casting director Debbie McWilliams had been impressed by Daniel Craig's performance in the 2004 film Layer Cake, and from that moment on, he was at the top of their list. Auditions proved that Craig could excellently transform to Bond and make the character what it's supposed to be. Sony approved the producer's decision, and the role was Craig's. When Daniel Craig stepped onto the Thames in 2005, escorted by the Royal Marines for the official announcement as the new James Bond, he was met with immense public backlash. Even the sight of him arriving in a life jacket, although it was completely reasonable and probably required, became an easy target for ridicule. The press and internet tore apart the new, shorter, blonde, unconventional Bond. Not tall enough, not handsome enough, not Bond enough, they said. For the better part of a year, Craig had to endure a relentless wave of doubt and mockery. But his suffering paid off with a masterpiece of a film, which we'll take a look at next. One of the first deliberate choices Casino Royale made was turning Bond into a rookie 00 agent. In Fleming's novel, Bond is already a seasoned veteran, but this change in the film lets us witness Bond's origin story adapted into the 21st century. This was a Bond who bled, got hurt, and who had to learn to become the spy he was meant to be. To me, what emphasized Bond's physicality and realism in this film was the fact that Craig was very much involved in the physical stuff and even performed a big portion of the very physically demanding stunts himself. He has said that if you never get hurt while playing Bond, you're not doing it right, and apparently he did consistently suffer small injuries throughout the shooting of the film. In the Madagascar parkour chase, the high-altitude, really high-risk stuff was handled by stunt doubles, but Craig also got on the crane himself and insisted on being involved as much as possible. My personal favorite part of the chase, however, is when Molaka does this crazy jump over a wall, and Bond just barges through that wall himself like a machine, emphasizing the blunt instrument theme the film was trying to set up. Another one of my favorite parts is the staircase fight sequence, which is just pure brutality from start to finish. It apparently took 3 whole days to film, and the effort definitely shows. As an amateur MMA fighter myself, I can appreciate the BJJ-style submission Bond uses to choke Obano with, and Bond seemingly having at least some type of a formal combat training background adds to the realism that this wasn't just some Hollywood-style Rambo kung fu stuff. Most Hollywood fights look flashy and show no real weight. They're choreographed dances where people trade punches without consequence. This fight and all the other ones in this film feel ugly and real. It's sweaty, clumsy, and desperate. And real fights are rarely pretty. They're initially about survival. While Bond isn't a flashy martial artist here showing pretty technique, he knows how to use leverage and submissions. And what makes him dangerous the most is his will to finish the fight at all costs. And then the bathroom scene after the fight where Bond cleans himself up, has a little drink, and looks at himself in the mirror. This is just about as Fleming as it gets in my opinion, along with Dalton's deleted hotel room scene in License to Kill. This murdering business is no longer just fun and games. This was real. Actions actually do have consequences here. He's injured, bleeding, has just killed another man, and he does what he has to do, which is to heal his injuries, get himself in order again, and get right back to work. Contrast all of this with all the previous CGI surfing, and Pierce Brosnan becomes a joke, quite literally. Just as the filmmakers reinvented Bond, they also had to adapt the story itself. In Fleming's original novel, Le Chiffre is a Soviet spy, desperate to recover money he's lost through reckless gambling. In the modern adaptation, the transition is effortless. Instead of Cold War espionage, he's a financier for terrorist organizations, scrambling to recover funds that could fuel deadly attacks. The core of his character, the desperation and the risk, it all remains intact. But the stakes feel sharper, darker, and unmistakably modern. What was once a story of espionage and greed becomes a tense thriller grounded in the real-world dangers of the 21st century. But what makes Le Chiffre one of the best villains ever, regardless of whether you look at the book or the movie, is that desperation I mentioned. He's not plotting some over-the-top take-over-the-world scheme. He's just trying to save his own skin. This brings a different kind of danger to the character, one that we haven't seen often not just in Bond, but films in general. Speaking of that, one of the best choices the filmmakers made when bringing the story to the big screen was to change the Baccarat game of the book to Texas Hold'em in the film. Baccarat is a primarily luck-based game, and while it worked tremendously in the novel, the skill required in poker works better with the high stakes involved. When Bond wins, it feels like he's truly earned it, regardless of the final straight flush hand being a little ridiculous. But that's a conversation the poker nerds can have without me. It makes the victory more glorious and Le Chiffre's defeat all the more devastating. That brings us to the climax of his desperation, and possibly the pinnacle of Fleming-esque suspense ever put to screen. After the final casino showdown when Bond has won and secured the money, the book and movie continue quite similarly. Vesper Lynd joins Bond for dinner, and after that gets herself kidnapped by Le Chiffre and his gang. After Bond gets baited to follow them, they both get taken to Le Chiffre's rural villa in the book and to a deserted, shady dungeon in the film. What follows is easily the most brutal torture sequence ever in fiction. While this scene in the movie is devastatingly good, I actually prefer the way it's told by Fleming. What goes on in Bond's head here, as Le Chiffre is attempting to make him a eunuch, is very interesting. In the book, as the pain gets worse, Bond reminisces of his old colleagues telling stories of being incarcerated and tortured endlessly, and how they experienced the growing agony. As the torture goes on, Bond remembers them telling him that the pain gets so intense that it actually begins to numb you down so that you no longer feel any pain, and eventually you enter this mysterious state of pleasure and bliss, as the pain has become so unbearable that your body can no longer tolerate it. The only risk, they told Bond, was that eventually the torturer would notice this and either kill the prisoner to stop wasting their time, or to tone down the level of pain they're inflicting to return the pain tolerance to baseline. This process of thought and Bond's internal battle inside his head is fascinating to follow. He has accepted his fate at this point, and he's just looking for an honorable way out. He's lost hope of help, and is only working towards biding some time to allow Le Chiffre to potentially be caught later on. so he's completely sacrificing himself for the cause. And Le Chiffre, for that matter, comes across as not as desperate in this scene as in the movie, interestingly enough, but just as a psychotic man on a mission. He sits there rather stoically, sipping his coffee, addressing Bond as his dear boy, while casually whipping his balls like a complete maniac. This chapter was extremely intense, and easily the best one in the book. The film adapts it well on screen as well, as Bond's pain and defiance and Le Chiffre's desperation and brutality are all very believable, not to mention Craig's and Mads Mikkelsen's great performances. Now I'll talk about one of the most popular aspects of this whole story, which is the main Bond girl Vesper Lynd, as I've got a bit of an unpopular opinion about her. Most people go crazy about Eva Green's Vesper, saying she's the greatest Bond girl of all time, but I've never been in that crowd. To me, she's actually very despicable, as she catastrophically betrays Bond and never bothers to reveal anything until it's too late. She deliberately chose silence, even when she'd already transferred the funds to the enemy, being Smersh in the book and Quantum in the film. Bond was already on her side and could have tried to find a way out for both of them, but Vesper plays into the romance, prolonging Bond's vulnerability. Yes, she's trapped and scared, but she chooses the path of least resistance, and delaying the inevitable until she can't destroys Bond emotionally. Obviously, from a storytelling perspective, all of this is insanely well done, but I don't like the general consensus of her being this tragic saint, as she just simply isn't. And I think the book's final chapter of her dead in the room in the resort with her letter to Bond works better than the film's flashy Venice action scene. While extremely well made and completely justified for an action blockbuster, it doesn't contain the brutal gut punch of the novel's finale. Also, and this is where we get to the bigger picture of Craig's saga, I don't like how the rest of the Craig films handled Vesper's demise. Vesper's role was to be part of Bond becoming Bond in Casino Royale, and that's it. The movie follows Fleming's vision perfectly, as in the book the betrayal creates the classic Bond persona, cold and dismissive of love, amplified by the bitch is dead line, which we also see in the movie, after which Bond goes off to his next mission oozing with confidence. Vesper is maggot food at this point. Bond's done with her, the emotion to her is cut off, which is why I hate how the following movies lingered on her. In Quantum of Solace, Bond is drowning in self-pity and Vesper martinis, with Vesper's theme playing in the background. In Spectre, Bond's still thinking about her, and even Blofeld mentions it. And in 2021, 15 godforsaken years later in No Time to Die, Vesper's theme is still playing, and Bond's still crying about her. Again, her story is over, but the following films just couldn't help but stuff her in there whenever they could. I'm definitely going to make future videos dedicated to these other Craig Bond films, but as the character is related to the topic and film of discussion, I wanted to mention this flaw. And in this way, Casino Royale feels completely standalone in its purity. It laid the foundation for the modern cinematic Bond formula, and in many ways was never topped. It set the stage for gritty realism, but also opened the door for the later tonal shifts of the Craig era. But Casino Royale on its own, I consider a masterpiece and a perfect modern adaptation of a classic novel. Most people mention it as one of the best Bond films, but I'll go ahead and say it's one of the best films, period. And I mean of all time, in any genre. I've loved it my whole life, and this video was long overdue, so thank you for staying with me. If you enjoyed this video, I encourage you to click the like button and comment your thoughts below. And if you want to see more of my cinematic analysis videos, I recommend subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.